The best way to manage time is not to think of it as time management at all, but priority management. After all, it's not just a matter of rearranging time, sometimes there just isn't enough. I work full time as a developer advocate, part time as a content creator, and I have my hobbies. For starters, I played 134 tabletop role playing game sessions last year, each one lasting on average about 3 hours. I read 50 books. I traveled to 8 different countries, some of them multiple times. Oh, and I bought an apartment and moved to a new country and started learning that language. So, like most people, I've got a lot going on. In this video, I'm going to show you how I've got things set up so that I can keep track of everything that I'm doing and want to be doing. Not so you can copy exactly what I'm doing, but just so you can get some ideas for things that maybe will work for you as well. In general, I like to categorize my setup into the things that are for the future, for the present, and for the past. And I start with the future first because that's the essence of planning. Like you're looking ahead and trying to set intentions. So for me, that consists of goals. Weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly goals, in addition to my core principles. But I actually start with the core principles. So, in core principles, I define as a one off, although it's still a living document, all the principles that really matter most to me. And for each principle, I describe what it is and what it looks like when I'm practicing it and not practicing it. I have less than 10 of these. These are things that I've identified over time, and I'm still like merging some and adding new ones as I go. In software testing, we have something called a requirement, and that usually comes from the business, and it's the idea of what it is that we're supposed to build. It's the specifications for the code that we want to deliver. But the requirements come at different levels. You might have one overarching kind of requirement that says, build this site, but underneath that site, there might be, the homepage. And under the homepage, it might be, get the graphic design underway. So there are different levels of requirements, but there's also a best practice called requirements traceability. And that is the practice of making sure that lower level requirements all trace up to the highest one. That's just a tech way of saying that when you work on something, you need to be making sure that it is still in line with your overall direction. And that's kind of what I like to do here. So with the core principles, I embed that into the yearly template. I'm going to show you all of this in a second. And then the yearly into the quarterly, quarterly into monthly, monthly into weekly, and then weekly into the daily note. So let me show you how that works in practice. I'm going to be showing you this on my Patreon vault. So all of the templates are there, but they're going to be blank. So first, let's start with a yearly review. It's kind of apropos because it's January right now. So this is the yearly review, and you'll see that I use the periodic notes plugin, and I have some sections here. Now, I just put a whole bunch of OKRs. OKR stands for Objectives, Key Result. It's just a framework that we use at work, so I find it handy to use it as well. And it just means that when you set an objective, you have to make sure to attach key results to it. So I've got my fake objectives here, and this is actually pulling in the objectives from 2022. Now, if I scroll down here, then I have, objectives for this year. And then I just have a template here for adding the yearly OKR. So then I'd select that, and then I'd say something like 2023 objective here. And what that does is it creates a page and then opens up that page according to a certain template. So then we would have the key result here. And here I would link to some of the core values or core principles. So I had my core principles, and then maybe I'll say principle one. Of course, this would actually be the name. And then the initiative would be here. After the year, I would do the quarterly note, and that one has a link to my core principles and also the yearly objectives. I didn't have a quarterly review in this dummy one last quarter, but it would be here. Has reflections. Maybe an objective might be to start learning Portuguese. So then on a monthly basis, I would then open this monthly note. It also takes a template that I've already defined, and you'll see it's pulling in those yearly OKRs from this year, the one that we just filled out. Hovering over it shows what we typed out. And then there's also a review for last month, and I have other reflections, and I'm using callouts to kind of prompt some reflection here. Let's just say, find a Portuguese teacher. So that's an initiative for this month. Then I would go to the weekly note. And the weekly note has a little bit more of a checklist. The checklist involves things that I like to do every week, so mainly chores and stuff, but it's just very nice to have a checklist to follow. That way I don't have to worry if I've forgotten to do something. So it's things like getting to inbox zero on my email and also processing some of my tasks. And then in the monthly initiatives, it's pulling in the initiatives that I typed into the monthly review. This is requirements tracing. I would have last week's goals here too. And then this is this week's goals. So I'm just typing try out teacher one on italki just as a goal, a dummy goal for the week. So that's how I use periodic notes on different time levels. I'm not going to go too much more into detail about how I set up those templates. For that, you can check out this video, but I'm going to move on and show you how it fits into the rest of it. So the goals are all forward thinking, and then the present is mainly centered around the daily note. The daily note for me is the source of truth and the cornerstone of really all of my notes. Everything that I do on that day is linked to that daily note implicitly or explicitly. So whenever I go to a daily note, I see everything that I've done on that day. So, for example, if I were going to open up a daily note, this is the template for it. I see my weekly goal. I have try out teacher one on italki. I don't have any tasks due today. That never happens in real life. I've got log, which is where I'll spend most of my time. I also have a process this query. It doesn't have anything in this demo vault, but usually this comes up with all of the things that I've imported that still have a certain tag on it. That means it's not yet processed. I have a random note that I might want to, process. I have a daily review and then an end of day checklist. But most of the time, I spend it here in the log. So as I go through the day, my log section might look something like this. And at the moment, I just have everything as bullets. I don't really worry about writing complete sentences or anything like that. It's just kind of free form and just phrases here. And then maybe if I have some free time or maybe at the end of the day, I'll go over all of these bullet points and then kind of try to categorize what they are. Mainly, do I need to still process it or is it something that can be crossed off my mental list? I found out that there is like a hidden feature of the minimal theme. Okay, it's not hidden, but I found out way after I started using that theme. And I'm really happy to be able to show it to you now because it is awesome. Minimal is made by Capano, who is also on the Obsidian developer team, and he's done some really cool stuff with this theme. So, for example, if I want to say that this is a task, then I can make it into a checkbox. This is your standard to do or task, and you can also click on it and make it completed. Let's say that this secret project is taking a while. We started it, but it's not done yet. Now, if we did a completed sign here, then that wouldn't really be appropriate, and neither would just a space or an uncompleted one. So instead, with the minimal theme, you can put this dash. You'll see that it has this partially completed symbol, which is so great because at least, I don't like leaving something unticked if I actually have done some work for it. And then what if we want to cancel this? Then instead of just having a normal task like that, we could go in and put a dash through it, and then it just does a strike through the entire line. Okay, this next one is John wanted to talk to me about the next release. All right. And let's say that that needs to be scheduled in my calendar. Going to need to set up time with John before we can talk, right? So I'm going to put this directly into my calendar, send him an invite. But in my daily note, I also want to reflect that. So the way that I do that is I put this left arrow, and when it gets rendered, it has like a little calendar symbol to reflect that it's already been scheduled elsewhere. And this thing, Dungeon 23 challenge is a thing. Okay, now is that something that I need to do something about? In this case, yes, because I decided that I want to participate in the Dungeon 23 challenge. I could put it as a task, but really it's not just a single thing. I really would want to have a page about it. And in that case, I would make this its own page. So then I'd have a link like this. So then I'd have a page for it. And then when I come back here, I don't want to take that off. I want to say that it's not really done yet. It's not a task that's done or not done, but I have moved it elsewhere. And then I put a right arrow, and it has a little visual indicator that tells me that it's somewhere else in my notes, and it's already linked to there. Now, for this LES recital, this would be a scheduling one again, so that goes in the calendar. I would put this in my calendar as well because really important tasks I also plan out as if they were events. So at the end of the day, I'm going to have something that looks like this. And I can tell at a glance that everything's been processed and nothing else needs to be actioned. And then I can move on to, my end of day stuff. So, what it looks like is that my daily note has these different visual indicators, and depending on what it is, I might process them a different way. So, these three are tasks. If the task has not been completed, I'll put it to reclaim. Usually, a lot of people just like to have normal task lists. That doesn't really work for me. I don't know. If it's in a list somewhere, it's just out of sight, out of mind. And I always look at my calendar. Things on my calendar get done. So I put tasks in my calendar, but I use something called Reclaim to make that process a little easier so that if a task gets extended or maybe I complete it faster, then everything gets automatically moved around without me having to decide where to move them. And I use Reclaim for that. So just check out this video if you want the details on how that all works. Still, some of the tasks I don't put in Reclaim. These are usually the less important ones. So I have some that I would put in next actions, some in waiting, and then someday maybe. So I would go back here and let's say, work on that secret project, do something like next action, and then I would put that in as a normal checkbox. In the checklist plugin, I have all my tasks and they are separated by the tag that I used. So, for example, in the to do next action, I've got work on that secret project. Looks like I had a few other things in here, and I could tick that off, and that gets ticked off there as well. But more likely than not, this was probably not that important. So on my calendar, I sometimes schedule in things for like, at my computer, just small little tasks that each take like 2 minutes to do or something. I'm not going to schedule 2 minutes in, but I might lump them all in and I go here and then go through all of those in one chunk. Now, for the tasks that are done that I've completed that day, I either put them in the habit tracker if they are habits or in the achievement section. So that usually goes just here, and I would put my achievements here. And that way, if I ever want to see, like for reviews, for performance reviews at work or something, or just to find out how well I've done, I will sometimes look at the achievement sections of the previous days to get an idea of how my week went. And then as for the habit tracker, I'm going to show you what this looks like for me. I found a free habit tracker template. Actually, there were like 43 of them, and I chose this one. They're from someone named Saturday Gift. I'm going to put a link in the description so you can go over there and download it yourself. But this is what it looks like. So the black parts are what came in the template. And then I just wrote that down. And the way that I did it is by using my iPad. This is just the Obsidian mobile app on my iPad. I think there's just something about doing it on the iPad with the Apple Pencil. It's pretty responsive. So, then I might like put another X in there if I did it that day. And my idea is that by doing it throughout the month, I'm going to have like a nice, very visual indication of whether or not I've done some of these habits. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, but what about Habit Tracker or Data View or bunch of other different plugins that you can use for this purpose? Yes, there are many ways that you can just mark something up in your front matter, and then the plugin is going to take all of those and then display them in some way. I've even experimented with putting those in the past. The problem is that really without exception, those aren't going to be future proof. Those are Obsidian only. Data view is Obsidian only. And I just wanted something that I'd still be able to take with me if I left Obsidian or if I just decided to use a new tool. So the cool thing with Excalidraw is I can just right click and then save this as a PNG to my vault. And then that's a PNG forever, basically. Like I can do whatever I want with that, whether or not I'm using Obsidian or Excalidraw. So I also like the fact that I can use my Apple Pencil to just write on this habit tracker. That just reminds me of when I used to do this with paper notebooks. And I don't know, I'm going to give it a go. Maybe I'll change my mind in the future, but I'm kind of enjoying it so far. So that's habit tracker and achievements. Canceled is canceled. I don't do anything with those. But when I move it, I usually move things to projects or Kanban or their own notes. Like, for example, this Dungeon 23 thing, I put it as its own note, but I might actually move that to something like a projects folder. And that way, it's an indication that there are going to be other tasks here. So depending on the project, I might have just a single project file with lots of different tasks that I just tick off. That's just the simplest, and it's for like really easy projects or very linear projects. Then there are other projects like when you talk about content, like creating content in general, it's an ongoing thing. It doesn't really have a start and an end. And in that case, I tend to prefer more of a Kanban approach. Recently, I've been moving away from the Kanban plugin and moving to another plugin by a friend of mine, Marcus Olson, named Obsidian Projects. I did this video with him on that. Kanban lets you move tasks by dragging and dropping them from one column to another. So there's still some projects I use that for. And then for everything else, I just use Obsidian Projects because it's just a nicer interface and it has like table, schedule, and thumbnail. Now, this is a demo one, but imagine having all of these videos or whatever blog post have the cover photo shown. It's just a nice gallery way of seeing things. And then when I schedule something, I do put them in a calendar. So Reclaim actually works with Google Calendar. So that's really cool. I only have to have one calendar. It syncs both my personal one and my work one, keeps it all in the same calendar. And I just would love to move to something else. Honestly, I haven't found anything that's as good as Google Calendar. Then I also have this year ahead note. Now, this is not really supposed to be a calendar. This is more like a way to look over the next few months without really being particular about the dates or anything like that. So let me show you this in light mode so it's a little easier to see. So again, this is a demo one because I didn't want to show you like the birthdays of everybody in my life or anything, but how I would do it would be I'd put like small font size and then, like code one, and then I'd say oh 01 Anna's birthday. Or maybe I'd say 13 trip to Paris. So then I have like an indication of what's happening in the next month. And I have these cute little icons that mean something to me, but probably nothing to you, but it's tied to what's happening in that month. This isn't really something that I worry about keeping completely updated. This is more like my year at a glance and seeing what's coming up and what do I need to prepare for. Then I've gone over the present stuff, like how I handle things as they come up. And the only other part is the reviews or looking back into the past. So I said future, present, past, but actually the future and the past are referring to the same notes. And that's because the first instance, they're goals. And then in the next instance, they're a review of whether or not I met those goals. So these are all the same notes, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly periodic notes. And then also the core principles. So this is just a way of saying, like, did it go well? Did it not go well? And that will usually coincide with the goals for the next period in time as well. So that's my process for how I get stuff done. I am not saying this is the best process or the most optimal or that you should do this too, because I've just cherry picked from methodologies, the parts that made sense to me, cobbled them together, and this is what I ended up with over time. And I encourage you to do the same thing with anything that I show you or talk about on this channel. If you'd like to know more about the Periodic Notes plugin, I go way more into detail about how to set that up and what exactly that does in this video, so check that out. Thank you for watching. Feliz Natal!